Hello and welcome to Yolanda Nava. Do you see what I see? Today we have a passionately creative and productive guest. He is documentarian, director, and author Jesús Treviño. Jesús is perhaps best known for his direction of the long-running drama Chicago Hope, but he has done dozens, if not hundreds, of documentaries and film, and is an immensely creative and award-winning talent. Welcome, Jesús Treviño.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be here with you.
Yeah.
I want to go back to your very beginnings because I was really in a state of awe when I read your bio, and I'm aware of your career in general, but the specifics and the many awards and the many films that you've done and documentaries is really incredible. And what is most amazing is you started as a student. And
yes.
How that happened?
Well, you know, I got involved in the Chicano movement back in 1968. And at the time I was a student going to college, a senior year at Occidental College. And we had done a canned food drive for the farm workers. And we drove up to Delano with our canned foods that we had collected as a donation to the struggle there. And it was my opportunity to meet with, for the first time, to meet with Cesar Chavez. And I must say it was a life-changing meeting. At the time, I was basically a young Chicano hippie. I was, you know, a bit nihilistic, kind of drifting. I was a philosophy major in school, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And when I met Chavez and saw this humble man working so hard for the freedoms and the dignity of his people, it forced me to look at myself and to say, well, what are you doing? What contributions are you making? And I realized that I was not doing anything. And so it really changed me. And it was at that moment that I committed myself to becoming not just a part of the Chicano movement, but to dedicating my life to bringing about social change for the betterment of our people, the Latino people, and ultimately human beings in general. You know, we focus on Chicanos, on Latin America, you know, Latino Americans, but really our concerns are the concerns of any human being on the earth. Everyone wants to have a good life, wants to be treated with dignity and respect, and doesn't want to be exploited. And so I think we start our homework at home, working with our own people and trying to you know, liberate them, liberate ourselves before we can, you know, do much to help others. But certainly my perspective is to try to better the world for everyone.
Well, that was a very exciting time because it was, you know, there was the Vietnam War going on. There was a lot of protests going on across the country. There was just an aliveness and the idea that we could make change happen. And I was, you know, I got drawn into all that too. And about the same time period, I was in graduate school at that point at UCLA. And what was interesting is that I think I met you a little bit later when you were working as covering different concepts and issues for KCET television. And you were covering the inquest for the Rubén Salazar murder. And it was at that time that, you know, I started really paying attention because that was a very critical day and time in my own life too. I think that was a very informative time for many of us of our generation, you know, the group of, you know, give us a few years here and there. What I was just recently reading, it's all listening to, it's all in the frijoles, and in your contribution to the chapter on justice. And you made the statement that the inquest of the Rubén Salazar death was a whitewash. Why has it been so difficult to get the real story out about that incident?
Well, you know, even back in the day, of course, the inquest was a response to a riot that had taken place, a police-provoked riot, and the burning of many buildings in East Los Angeles, and the arrest of over 500 people. And the authorities that be were concerned that this could continue. And so they needed to quell the social unrest that was going on, the justifiable social unrest. And there were a number of community leaders, clergy in particular, that said, you know, we don't know how long we can stave off people's human reaction to being mistreated the way the police have done. And so they decided, well, let's have an inquest to air all of this. And the idea was that if they had this inquest into the death of Ruben Salazar, they would be able to, you know, quell the community and perhaps find out what had gone wrong or what had caused his death. Of course, in fact, what really transpired was that the police authorities utilized the inquest to justify their attack on the people. And the first couple of days of the inquest, in fact, were nothing but items that were being presented that showed community members throwing rocks at police or police cars without any explanation that people were reacting to the police having attacked them without any reason or reason for them to do this, and the number of people that had gotten brutalized by the police. And that was not what the inquest was, you know, intended to do. They wanted to basically paint a picture of an unruly community that had provoked the police, when in fact it was the opposite. It was the police that had unjustifiably attacked the people. And of course, the inquest resulted in a verdict that Ruben Salazar had died at the hands of another. And they showed who that other was. There was a deputy sheriff firing a tear gas canister into the Silver Dollar bar, and that canister did in fact hit Salazar in the head and killed him. But no charges were ever brought to bear. And of course, by then, the community had quieted down, and it had achieved what the authorities wanted, which was to basically chill everyone out. But there was certainly no justice that was ever, you know, revealed during this process.
No, I was there that day. I was a wide-eyed, innocent graduate student, and I attended a peaceful demonstration that I was part of. I was in the park with grandparents, parents, children on their father's shoulders, toddlers on mother's arms, and, you know, in strollers, grandparents there. It was a peaceful day of music and speeches in a park. And I was there, and we were, all of a sudden, the baton started coming down, the tear gas started flying. I had to get out of there. I don't know how I got out of there. I followed somebody away. I didn't know the neighborhood well. And so what happened that day was a violent attack on the peacefully gathered people in the park. So you're absolutely right on that. It will hopefully be cleared up at some point. It continues to be a mystery, but it isn't a mystery, because most of us who have looked or read any of the reports know what actually happened that day, and truth will be revealed at some point, I hope. The interesting thing is that you went from there to making a whole series of documentary films, and some you've been awarded for. What is it? The Blood Sangre de Raíces de Sangre. And you've done some very, very important work over the decades of your life. What sparked the total, I mean, you mentioned the total dedication to this movement and to you know, to justice and to using storytelling and documentation to cover things and to bring them out to the light. But you've done so much. You set up, created Latinopia. You became very involved in the Writers Guild, the Writers and Directors Guild in Los Angeles, which was a very important thing for you to do. You've been honored by them. And the trajectory has just been an extraordinary output of very important, productive work. Tell us about some of the highlights in that, which you highlighted in your book, Eyewitness.
Well, you know, I've been very fortunate in that I got my start at KCET early on, and I quickly was in a situation where I could, you know, originate programming. There was very supportive person there. The general manager at KCET was very supportive of my efforts and understood the need to have more of a Latino presence on public television. And I began doing documentaries, and as it coincided, I happened to be at a lot of the key events and key movements that were going on at the time. The Raza Unida Convention, for example, in El Paso, Texas in 1972, Reyes Lopez Tijerina and the land grant movement in New Mexico, the farm workers in California, the Crusade for Justice in Denver, Colorado. I was there filming all of these events going on, and so I saw firsthand what our people were doing and how we were trying to coalesce and shape our presence in a society, in a country that had denied us our rightful presence and had in many ways discriminated against us. And it was a whole generation, a baby boom Latino generation of Chicanos that were affirming, ya basta, we've had enough, and we're going to bring about social change. And I felt early on, the first time I showed one of the little Super 8 films I had done of a picket in East Los Angeles, and I showed it in a community setting, and I saw the response of our people to seeing themselves up on a screen and to seeing our issues being dealt with up on a screen. And I thought, this is a major thing that I need to hold on to, because this is educating our people and it's bringing about a social awareness of the issues and themes that we must dedicate ourselves to. And from then on, I knew that media was going to be, you know, my forte. And I went from doing documentary work at KCET to doing independent documentaries. And then I decided I'd always wanted to work with actors, and I decided to see if I could segue my way into directing, you know, actors, and I managed to, after many years of struggle, break into episodic television directing, and I spent many years directing primetime television shows, everything from Star Trek, Next Voyager, and Babylon 5, science fiction shows, to hospital shows, ER, Chicago Hope, to criminal shows, Law and Order, Criminal Minds, and so I was successful in that, and this allowed me to continue to make my presence and to get involved with the Directors Guild. For me, it wasn't so much the Writers Guild as the Directors Guild, and for a while I was on the national board of the Directors Guild, and I helped create the Latino committee of the Directors Guild. It still exists today and does wonderful work. And so, you know, I was able to make my impact felt, and I've continued. And after retiring from television directing, I created Latinopia, which is an online service that provides videos and blogs about our community, and focuses on our art, literature, music, theater, cinema, and food. And so I've continued to do that. And apart from all that, I've also been a writer. And I've written my memoir, which you mentioned, Eyewitness, a filmmaker's memoir of the Chicano movement on Arte Público Press. And also I've written 3 collections of short stories, the Fabulous Sinkhole, The Skyscraper That Flew, and Return to Arroyo Grande. I've created this fictitious world and community of young people, and we follow them from the time they're 14 and 15 till the time they're adults. And it's fun. It's a fun fictional world that I've created. And more currently, I'm working now on a book that I hope will be a legacy that we leave for future generations. It's called the Chicano Documentary. And in it, I'm going to be focusing on landmark Chicano documentaries that have been done by Latinos about our reality here in the United States, and how important it is that we have, in creating these documentaries, we have really educated all of America about who we are as Latinos. And so I think we've made an incredible contribution, not just to our own community, to educating ourselves about ourselves, but certainly educating the wider, larger community, largely through a lot of PBS shows done by a number, of filmmakers, certainly not just myself, but many filmmakers who are Latino, who are Chicano, who have contributed their work, and collectively, we have made some pretty amazing documentaries.
There have been amazing things done, and I want to go back a little bit in your time frame, because you did a documentary on Alamo, and I mean on the Alamo, the attack.
The Alamo, yeah. Yeah, it was actually a drama. It was called Seguin, and I asked myself, what were the Mexican Americans doing at the time in the Alamo? And it turns out that there were many Mexican Americans who were Tejanos. They had been born and raised there in San Antonio. And when Santana's army came, he wasn't only interested in going after the gringos, if you will, but he was interested in acquiring the land that was owned at that time by other Mexicans, by Mexican Americans or Tejanos. And in order to defend their lands, they joined with the Anglos inside the Alamo. And of course, we know the outcome of that. But one of the major figures who was sent out of the Alamo to get help was a man named Juan Seguin, and he later became mayor of San Antonio, Texas, after the fall of the Alamo and after the birth of the Texas Republic. And when the Mexican-American War transpired, he found himself being banished from San Antonio, from Texas, because he was Mexican, and he wound up fighting on the Mexican side of the Mexican-American War. And he died in Mexico, but was reburied in the town that today bears his name, Seguin, Texas.
Interesting. Wasn't part of that Santa Anna Mexican didn't want to see Texas become a slave state?
That was certainly part of it, yes. And of course, the North Americans, the Easterners who came over, they were invited at first by the Mexican government, but soon they kind of took advantage of the situation, and they wanted to grow Texas as a cotton growing, place. And that was one of the things that, of course, was being fought for by Santana. And of course, you look back on history, and it was, to my mind, the Mexican Americans, the Tejanos, who were living at that time, were in a sense the first Chicanos. They were bilingual, they were bicultural, and they understood both worlds, but they were citizens of this country. And so they had to find a way to survive. And, historically, We know that history shows how in many instances they were, exploited. Certainly after the Mexican-American War, they were exploited by the invasion of Anglo-Americans, and we are still facing that legacy today. And it's one of the reasons why I think Latinos in general, Mexican Americans in particular, have had years and years of discrimination that we've had to overcome.
I think it's very important that with the creation of this new Latino museum at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., that these stories, these films that you've created and others need to be included as part of that new museum. And the other piece is that connected to the Texas and to the Mexican-American War, it was the Mexicanos and early Californios in California who prevented California from becoming a slave state. So these are important issues and contributions that we have made as a people that have never been raised in the history books. And we now have a new piece of legislation that is going to create ethnic studies as a graduation requirement in California. It goes into effect in 2 more years. And I think this is an opportunity to bring in all this new history that is not part of the history that needs to be told in order to help heal all the woundedness and suffering that many of our people and other people in minority groups have been suffering and continue to suffer. So it's an opportunity. I see this as an opportunity now to repurpose all of this work that you've done and others have done in the movements.
Well, that's one of the rationales behind my undertaking this massive study of the documentaries, because I think, you have documentaries like the Longoria affair, for example, where Felix Longoria was a World War II hero who came home and was not allowed to be buried in his hometown because of the Anglos. And Lyndon Baines Johnson stepped in and wound up arranging for Longoria's body to be buried at Arlington National Cemetery in recognition of his heroism. And so you have instances like this where our documentaries have told the untold story of America. Because this is not just a Chicano story, it's an American story. And where is Texas? Where's California? Where's New Mexico? Where's California? They're in the United States. And the history of the people in those places, the Chicanos there, is the history of America. And so I'm just so impressed that so many of my colleagues, people like Hector Galan, like Silvia Morales, Susan Racho, Lourdes Portillo, Paul Espinosa. I mean, there's so many great filmmakers who have been documenting key moments in our history and showing the injustice and bringing it to light and also showing the accomplishments of our community, showing the hero stories. And so this is all part of what I think I'm hoping to leave in this book, the Chicano documentary.
Well, I think it's very important because I as a student of history, I take very seriously the adage and the thing that we were told in every history class I've ever taken. We haven't learned from history, and we can learn from history in order to write it, because of course history is written by the victors of most wars or wars. And so that's something I take very seriously. And I think it's very important that our textbooks and our school books and our general image of peoples in America and of the American process, the movement to make, manifest destiny across the entire continent of the America, that we include these stories as well, because these are stories of contribution and they're very powerful.
Yes, and the sad part is that and the feature in the narrative arena, we have not been as successful. We have some great filmmakers like Moctezuma Esparza, for example, and Gregorio Nava, Luis Valdez, who have been able to achieve some headway there in terms of bringing our presence to the big screen. But in comparison, certainly to African American community or other communities, we haven't been as prolific as we should be and as we ought to be. But you know, I think I'm involved with a thing called the Mexican American Educational Cultural Foundation, and we are providing scholarships to a group of 25 to 30 Latino graduate film students, because our hope is that by encouraging film students, the students that are today's students, that we will in 10 to 15 years create a generation of filmmakers that can begin to make some difference in terms of cranking out films about our community and about our presence. And it's only going to be if we cultivate the younger filmmakers today. And fortunately, we have a number of mentors, people like, you know, Bel Hernandez, for example, and, you know, Dennis Leone, producer, writer, you know, Luis Valdez, I mentioned. There's quite a number of activists who are acting as mentors for this younger generation, so that they will, you know, address filmmaking not as my generation did, which was doing it a la brava without any guidance, but now we have mentors. Now we can say, here's how we did it, you know, and be encouraging and supportive in that way.
Well, this is important. It's important, ongoing work, and the writing of history, the writing meaning making it upright, including making it more inclusive and make us aware of all the social movements that have helped make this a great nation and that need to be furthered, because we've gone a bit backwards in the last several years and we're just kind of getting things straight again. I was very happy to see the results of the recent midterm election, but we have to keep the democracy, and all of these movements have been part of this moving towards that more perfect union. I love that phrase in the Constitution, because that's the goal, and we haven't gotten there quite yet. So these are important things to, you know, to engage in. I love the theme in your new book. We were talking about this the other day on the telephone about memory. And I think in our generation, you know, the older I get, these things keep popping up because, you know, 50 years of history are flying by in my, you know, in my life and in my head. And I like, as a journalist, I was there for many of these events and saw them firsthand, and certainly have read more and beyond to understand, you know, the background of history of everything. But it's, you want to get it down on paper. So talk about memory and the importance of memory.
Well, I do think that, you know, particularly as we get to be, you know, our age, you look back and you see the importance of the contributions we've made. They've been incredibly unique and masterful. You know, a whole generation of young people who went on and went from being students to honing out careers in education, in medicine, in you name it, in communications and in the entertainment industry, you know, social workers. I mean, you know, we've had a whole generation who dedicated themselves to giving back to our community, to helping improve our community. And a lot of them, I see them, that we get together every now and then, and they're still at it. And I think this is very, very important, that, you know, we're getting, you know, that we have this generation that continues to this day to, you know, to do what we've been doing all of our lives, which is creating history. And it's important not to forget that, and to memorialize our contributions and the legacy we're going to leave. And I think that's our cue to kind of conclude.
Well, there are other questions I want to ask you. We'll have to save it for another time and another year, because I was interested in your projections into the 21st century that you included in your eyewitness novel, book, memoir. And so I want to thank you very much for joining us and for your many, many contributions over the decades of your life. You make us proud. and we'll keep moving all of that forward. So thank you so much. Mr. Trevino.
Let me just say, Yolanda, that I'm very proud of you for doing what you're doing and continuing to keep the spirit alive and the flame of our progress alive. And it's really an indication that all of us need to and can contribute and continue to be part of the important movement we started more than 50 years ago.
That's right. And we'll keep going. And thank you so much.
All
and
right.
To the audience, I want to thank you for joining us. And I want to wish you a very blessed Hollywood holiday season and new year, peace, joy, and love. May we have that more and more in the coming year. And I'll look forward to seeing you in January for another edition of Yolanda Nava. Do you see what I see? Thanks for joining. See you then.